Hi, Chris Wilson again. I'm actually here to do two things. I am going to talk about incubation in just a minute, but first I want to call out what bridges the next three talks that we have here together, which is the workflow of standards. And if you think of the general process of standardization, you start with ideas, you go through some kind of process of some form, and ultimately standards get created. All three of these talks actually refer to things about the beginning of this process. And I'll start by talking about incubating new ideas, new APIs, new solutions, kind of hanging out there. Dingwei is going to talk about a proposal for how to improve how we as a community look at new things, new spaces, new ideas, new big stuff. And then Ian is going to talk about how the team is looking at evaluating big strategic topics. So let's start with incubation. And we, by the way, have been talking about incubation for a super long time, at least since TPAC in 2016. I went back and looked at my notes. I co-hosted a breakout session on what was then a fairly new pattern for API development. And since then, there have been loads and loads of incubations at the W3C, both in the web platform incubation community group. I hate spelling that out loud. But since 2020, at least, we've had this as a priority on the advisory board. And to be honest, we haven't gotten a whole lot done on it until this year. We did have a breakout, another breakout at TPAC in 2020. I actually think we had several other breakouts at TPAC in that time zone. But this year, I finally got around to drafting kind of a starter document on this. The advisory board discussed it at our January face-to-face meeting and posted it. And then we had a breakout in March at the breakout day and discussed it even more then. Now, to set the context, though, I don't really have any answers for you today. This is not a conclusions discussion here. This is really just framing some of the projects that I think we need to solve moving forward around incubation. And fundamentally, the point of doing web standards in the end is really interoperability. We need to enable and ensure that multiple implementations can interoperate. And if we call something a web standard and it doesn't interoperate, it only works in one place, that's really a disservice to our users, to the web users. And the web does have this interoperability across multiple implementations, multiple operating systems, devices, etc., built into its DNA. But of course, when you start out incubating an idea, an API, that's not the point. You don't start out normally with having multiple implementers say, oh yeah, we want to implement this solution together at the same time in lockstep. You really want to not commit to even ultimately solving the problem when you first start incubating things. And one of my colleagues from a long time ago, meaning 10 years ago or something, used this phrase to me that has always resonated, which is don't fall in love with your first good idea. And it really calls out what incubations are. They're the ability to fail gracefully. You can try something out, maybe it doesn't work out, maybe other people don't agree. You don't have to go build the standard and commit to building a standard as step one. Another positive feature of this, of course, is iteration can be much faster when you're not trying to get consensus on every last thing just to explore the idea. Now, at the same time, there is the hardest question to me in incubation, which is when do you get out of incubation? We need to have some kinds of on-ramp patterns to how to get out of incubation and into a working group with consensus rules and IPR and all these other great things. And until we have some better guidance, some consensus guidance on at least what the different paths look like, it's kind of hard to figure out how you can incubate and be productive at the same time. There are a number of other questions to consider. One key one is we really need to define best practices around what we call incubations and how we refer to them. These aren't standards, they're not W3C standards. The W3C does not endorse them, for example. Anything that's a community group report It's not a standard, and we need to be clear about that. At the same time, we also need some guidelines for what incubation might be expected prior to a working group being formed. Doesn't mean there's a single solution there or a single answer to that question, but just setting up some context for people. And with that framing, I did want to say we have a bunch of discussion ongoing about this. The AB is continuing to treat this as a priority. Hopefully we'll actually be getting more done with it now. We have the AB summary to look at. We have a GitHub issue to join in the discussion on. We haven't figured out if we're starting a task force or whatever, but we have a meeting right after the AC meeting, so we'll probably talk about that then.